Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Born on July 16, 1982, Katrina is the youngest of Vicky's 3 children. She has 2 siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda. Katrina's parents separated when she was young, and she lived with her mother in Mason, Illinois, a suburb outside the city. Katrina is a kind, cheerful person who brings joy to those around her. She especially loves the holiday season and enjoys giving humorous gifts to friends and family. Katrina is a devoted church member, always willing to help those in need. Katrina was content with her life, and in her 20s, she met Todd Smith at a bar. Todd was not only charming but also successful. As a financial planner, he was able to run his own business from home. They found that they had a lot in common and their relationship blossomed. One thing that helped their relationship grow was Todd's flexible work schedule, which allowed them to travel extensively together. After 3 years of dating, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. The couple began planning their wedding, deciding to have an intimate ceremony at a local park. Katrina was thrilled at the prospect of their future together, especially since she had fallen in love with Todd's 3 daughters and was excited to be a part of their lives. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, found him to be trustworthy and personable. They believed that he would take good care of Katrina. After their marriage, Katrina and Todd began living together in Masny. On October 20, 2012, Katrina called her mother to say that she was house-sitting for a friend. During the conversation, Katrina mentioned that she would be coming to dinner on October 24th and that she had something to share with Vicky, leaving her mother wondering what it could be. Before the conversation ended, Vicky promised to make Katrina's favorite meal: chicken and dumplings, a promise she never kept. On October 23rd, Todd Smith called 911, reporting that his wife Katrina had disappeared. He had been trying to reach her for hours without success. He told police that she was house-sitting for a friend and that the house was empty when he arrived. When Katrina's sister and brother, Miranda and Chad, learned of her disappearance, they were worried. Chad, who was training with the U.S. Army in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help find his sister. That night, a resident called police about an abandoned car near Rock River. After investigating, the police determined that the car belonged to Katrina. They could not find any signs of a fight or anything else that would indicate that she was missing. Vicky's worst fears were confirmed when she learned that Katrina's daughter's car had been found abandoned in a ditch on the side of the road in an unfamiliar area. The situation seemed ominous, and Vicky could not shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to Katrina. If Katrina's car was in that area, then someone must have taken her and left the car there. After the discovery of the car, Katrina's case was officially declared a missing persons case and search efforts were intensified. At 11 p.m. on October 12th, Todd was taken to the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department for questioning. During the interview, Todd told police that he last saw his wife, Katrina, on October 22nd. According to Todd, Katrina had come to their home for a short time to do laundry in preparation for a job interview the following day. While doing laundry, she went to the mall to buy groceries and returned home at 8:30 p.m. After returning home, she left again, as she was house-sitting for a friend, as she told Todd. After Katrina was reported missing, her husband Todd made a heartfelt public appeal, pleading for her safe return. Todd broke down in tears, begging anyone with information about Katrina's disappearance to come forward. Speaking to the media, he urged the public to share any information they had about her whereabouts. As the search for Katrina continued, police and volunteers formed search teams to comb the area. They focused their efforts near the park where Katrina's abandoned car was found, hoping to uncover evidence or clues. Upon arriving in Illinois after military training in Oklahoma, Katrina's brother Chad met a group of people at the park who were eager to help find Katrina. To facilitate the search effort, Chad used his military training to lead the volunteers. He carefully mapped the area, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated a thorough investigation. As part of this effort, police used trained dogs to join the search. Katrina's mother, Vicky, created missing person flyers and distributed them throughout town, placing them at gas stations, convenience stores, and lamp posts to notify as many people as possible of her daughter's disappearance. Despite her efforts, Vicky's emotional state due to grief and fear made it difficult for her to participate in the search. Chad, who had supported Todd throughout this time, encouraged him to focus on finding Katrina, reminding him that they needed to stay strong. Later, a police officer discovered several items near Katrina's abandoned car. These items included a wallet, a cell phone, and a towel that appeared to have been used to wipe up blood. It was clear that someone had thrown these items away when they left the car. At that point, the police suspected that something terrible had happened. The items discovered have been sent to the crime lab for further analysis, and police are anxiously awaiting the test results to shed further light on the investigation. During the investigation into Katrina's disappearance, police investigated her personal life for clues. They wanted to understand every aspect of her life by looking into her relationships, daily routine, and any potential involvement in activities such as gambling or drug use. To gather information, police interviewed Katrina's friends and family members. They all described Katrina as a kind and responsible person. Katrina's family and friends described her as a dedicated and hardworking person. They claimed that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. Instead, they described her as a devoted wife and a woman of integrity. During the investigation into Katrina's disappearance, a local woman came forward with a useful piece of information. She claimed to have seen a blue car matching Katrina's parked on a bridge over the Rock River on the night she disappeared. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it, but the woman could not tell the person's gender or race, preventing her from providing further details. Police had to investigate possible motives and consider whether anyone, including those close to Katrina, wanted to harm her. Despite claims of a happy marriage, Todd became a target of interest, as police know that even seemingly happy relationships can harbor hidden conflicts or secrets. 3 days after searching for Katrina, police examined her cell phone at the crime lab and found vital information. The phone provided a wealth of data, including text messages, incoming and outgoing calls, photos, videos, and her GPS location. This information allowed police to reconstruct a clear picture of Katrina's activities. Notably, they discovered that she was having an affair with a coworker named Guy Gabriel. The relationship began when they met after work one evening. Initially getting along well, it eventually developed into a romantic relationship. A police background check on Guy revealed a troubled past. It revealed a history of domestic violence, and the police suspected him of being involved in Katrina's disappearance. Furthermore, the police discovered text messages sent by Guy to Katrina, pressuring her to leave her husband Todd for him. Guy then became the prime suspect in the case. The police suspected that Guy may have reacted violently after Katrina refused to leave her husband for him. The revelation of Katrina's affair shocked her family and friends, as they believed her marriage to Todd was perfect and happy. No one suspected that Katrina had been having an affair behind Todd's back. When Todd discovered the affair through the police investigation, he was devastated. The news of his wife's affair hit him hard, taking him completely by surprise. Guy was interviewed by police about Katrina's disappearance. During the interview, Guy appeared nervous and admitted to his affair with Katrina, but denied any involvement in her disappearance. He claimed to have been at work the night Katrina went missing. Further investigation uncovered a previous incident that occurred 2 weeks before Katrina went missing. It was reported that during lunchtime at the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, a black Volkswagen Jetta drove through the parking lot with the sunroof open. The driver, who was wearing a mask, handed out flyers through the sunroof. When employees read the flyers, they found a derogatory statement about Katrina and Guy's relationship. The car quickly sped away, leaving people wondering who the mysterious driver was. Police interviewed Katrina's hairdresser, who shared that Katrina felt threatened and wanted to buy a gun for self-defense. Katrina told her hairdresser that she suspected someone was following her. Police searched Katrina's car at the police garage for evidence. Using a chemical called luminol, which glows when it comes into contact with blood, they found a significant amount of blood in the trunk. On November 9th, 17 days after a firefighter in Rock River discovered a body, and the fire department was called to assist in recovering the body and pulling it from the water. After it was pulled from the water, it was determined that the body was that of a woman. However, because the body was so badly decomposed, identification was difficult. It was unclear whether the body was Katrina's. The body was then taken to the medical examiner's office, where an autopsy was performed to determine the cause of death. To confirm the identity, dental records were sent to a county specialist for analysis. The expert then compared the dental features of the body with those in Katrina's records, confirming that the body was Katrina. Katrina's autopsy revealed that her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. When her family learned that her body had been discovered, they were devastated. The heartbreaking news left them reeling, and it was difficult to accept the full extent of what had happened. Katrina's mother, Vicky, found the news difficult to accept, and the thought of her daughter suffering such a violent end was almost unbearable. Although Guy Gabriel is no longer a suspect, police have sought his perspective on who may have harmed Katrina. Guy reveals that Katrina had mentioned divorce. He believes that Todd's controlling nature may have escalated and led to the tragedy. As police dig deeper into Katrina and Todd's marriage, some disturbing facts come to light. Katrina had told several people that she wanted a divorce from Todd. In addition, police discovered that Katrina had met with a divorce attorney just one day before her disappearance. Contrary to what Katrina claimed, she was not house-sitting at a friend's apartment, but had actually moved out after her split from Todd. Based on the information gathered and interviews conducted, police began to suspect that Todd was behind the mysterious incident at Katrina's workplace. Suspicions were heightened when police discovered that Todd had recently driven a car matching the make and color of the one involved in Katrina's murder, a black VW Jetta. Todd was believed to have been test driving the car at the time of the murder. When police told Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her case, and that he had been arrested, they were shocked and in disbelief. The family had loved and respected Todd as a member of the family, and the news was devastating. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was devastated by the news. The thought that her son-in-law could commit such a heinous crime made her sick. She had always trusted Todd and could not imagine that he would commit such a terrible act. The possibility that Todd was responsible for her daughter's murder never crossed her mind. The police discovered that Todd's investment company was in legal trouble and he was no longer working. As a result, Katrina was the family's sole source of income. Based on this information, the police suspected that if Katrina left Todd, she would take the money with her. This possibility may have motivated Todd to consider killing his wife as a way to gain control of the family's finances. Police obtained a search warrant for Todd and Katrina's home to collect evidence. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage that had blood on it, leading police to suspect that it could be the murder weapon. The injuries on Katrina's body supported this theory, as they were consistent with blunt force trauma. To confirm their suspicions, a DNA test was conducted on the bat. The results showed that the blood on the bat belonged to Katrina. Furthermore, police discovered a large, unusually clean area under the car. Upon examination, they discovered that the blood left under the car matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, her husband Todd was arrested and charged in connection with her death. Todd's trial began on January 11, 2017. During the trial, the prosecution presented its case against Todd, replaying the events of the night Katrina died. Key evidence included a recent meeting between Katrina and a divorce attorney to discuss her marital problems. The prosecution argued that Katrina's decision to divorce indicated that their relationship was in trouble. According to the prosecution, Katrina had visited Todd's home that day to do laundry in preparation for a job interview the next morning. During the visit, the prosecution claimed that Katrina had made it clear to Todd that she wanted to end their marriage. They argued that this caused Todd to become aggressive and attack Katrina. The prosecution alleged that while Katrina was in the garage, Todd became angry and picked up a baseball bat, beating her to death. After Katrina died, Todd allegedly moved her body into the trunk of her car. Todd then drove Katrina's body to a remote area called Rock River, where he disposed of the body by throwing it off a nearby bridge. After dumping her body, Todd parked his car on the side of the road and walked home. Once home, he cleaned up any evidence of his crime by disposing of Katrina's cell phone and the bloody towels he used to mop the garage floor. Todd Smith was found guilty by a jury and sentenced to 55 years in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamont Springs, Florida. She grew up in a loving family with her parents, an older brother, and a younger sister. Her father worked in construction and often traveled to other states for work, so her mother mainly took care of her and her siblings. Throughout her childhood, Jessica was a cheerful and active girl who loved playing outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family planned to visit her grandparents for Easter. While her mother packed for the trip, her father went to the store to buy some vacation items. Jessica asked her mother if she could go to the yard to wait for her father to return. Her mother agreed but told her to stay in the yard and not wander off. The family's apartment complex was located in a quiet area, surrounded by many trees and away from the main road. The neighborhood was considered safe, and children often played outside without regular adult supervision. However, when Jessica's father returned home around 6 p.m., he asked his wife where Jessica was, and she was surprised to learn that Jessica was not in the yard as she had thought. The parents searched the yard but couldn't find their daughter Jessica. Growing increasingly worried, they started asking neighbors if they had seen Jessica. A neighbor reported seeing Jessica sitting on a bench, reading a book, but this information yielded no results. As night began to fall and Jessica was still missing, her parents contacted the police. The police quickly began search operations, questioning neighbors and canvassing the surrounding area. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to find Jessica, forcing the police to expand their search to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The caller's voice was distorted by background noise. But the police determined that Jessica might have been near a water pumping station several miles from her home. When the police arrived at the water pumping station, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Jessica's body was discovered near the pumping station, hidden in a black trash bag. This location was only a few meters from the road, but the pumping station was located under a bridge, making it nearly impossible to detect. Next to the body were some magazines and a children's mirror. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and handed her body over to the medical examiner for further investigation. Investigators turned their attention to tracing the 911 call, which they believed was made by the killer. Their goal was to use the call to identify the killer. However, the call was made from a public phone at a nearby gas station, and when the police arrived, the perpetrator had already fled. Detectives tried to take fingerprints, but it was a difficult task because this was a public phone booth, which likely had many fingerprints from different users. In addition, it was possible that the killer had wiped the phone clean after calling or had worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Further investigation revealed that Jessica may have been killed elsewhere and her body moved to the water pumping station. Evidence on the ground showed that the killer pulled the body out of the car, then put it in a trash bag and dragged it to the water pumping station. Jessica's clothes were still intact, except for a missing shoe, which was not found at the scene. The only potential clue at the crime scene was tire tracks on the ground. There was a possibility that they belonged to the killer's car, so the police took photos and analyzed the prints. Meanwhile, a medical examination of the body showed that the victim died from strangulation, with marks on the face and neck indicating the killer used bare hands. An autopsy showed that Jessica had eaten a hamburger shortly before her death. Her mother said she did not give Jessica a hamburger that day, suggesting the killer may have provided her with food. Additionally, forensic experts found no evidence of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unknown. Initially, police had suspected Jessica's parents of being involved in her disappearance because they had not had a solid alibi. Jessica's mother had claimed that she had packed up the apartment, and her father had claimed that he had been out shopping, so they clearly had had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police had been confused as to how the killer had been able to get Jessica out of the yard without anyone noticing or her screaming, leading them to believe that the killer might have been someone Jessica knew and trusted, and she might have voluntarily left with them. The killer's voice on the 911 call had provided another clue. In the recording, experts had detected feelings of grief and remorse, suggesting that the killer had truly felt remorse for his actions. The fact that the killer had taken the risk of calling 911 suggested that they might have been trying to minimize guilt or manipulate the investigation. However, the obvious sadness in the killer's voice had led investigators to believe that the killer had likely been remorseful for his actions. The investigation had reached a turning point when police had found a roll of black garbage bags in the trunk of Jessica's father's car, similar to the bag used to dispose of the victim's body. However, expert examination had shown that the bags had come from another manufacturer, eliminating Jessica's father as a suspect. The focus of the investigation had then turned to other suspects. Forensic experts had conducted a thorough examination of the victim's clothes and body, thereby obtaining many clues. One notable discovery had been that there had been a significant amount of dog hair on Jessica's clothes, even though her family had not owned dogs. This suggested that the dog hair might have come from the perpetrator's dog. Additionally, human hair of an unidentified man had been found on Jessica's body, and experts had been working to extract the DNA profile from the sample. However, this process had taken several days. Further examination had revealed two strange fibers on Jessica's clothes that experts had analyzed and determined likely had originated from car seat covers and carpets. This finding had supported the theory that Jessica had been killed at a location other than the water pumping station and then transported there by car. To determine the breed of dog that had shed hair on Jessica's clothes, experts had used the FBI's specialized database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from many different dog breeds. By comparing fur samples with a database, experts had determined that the fur had belonged to a Shar-Pei. This discovery had suggested that the perpetrator might have owned a Shar-Pei and that the dog's fur had been transferred to Jessica's clothes at the perpetrator's home or in the car. According to investigators' initial theory, the killer might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to buy hamburgers at McDonald's, and then taken her to his home, where she had been murdered. To aid the investigation, experts had tried to improve the quality of the phone call recordings, but this had proved difficult. They had decided to try a different approach and sought help from NASA, which had advanced audio enhancement tools originally designed for use in space recordings. NASA had agreed to assist and provide police with higher quality audio. However, experts still needed to sample the suspect's voice to compare with the call recording. Detectives had suspected that the killer might have known Jessica, so they had played the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize the voice. At first, she had said the voice was familiar but couldn't place it. When she had heard it a second time, she suddenly had realized that the voice belonged to a neighbor who had lived in their complex. Although she couldn't remember his name, she had told detectives that he often had taken his Shar-Pei for walks in the yard. Police had quickly identified this man as James Crow, 35 years old. Hours after Jessica had disappeared, investigators had questioned her neighbors, including James Crow. James had told them that he had seen Jessica in her yard while walking his dog, Pumpkin, a Shar-Pei. They had exchanged a few words and then he had left. Detectives had looked into his past and had found no history of criminal activity. He used to be a truck driver, but had been currently unemployed and had spent most of his time walking around the neighborhood with his dog. Detectives realized that the similarity in voice and breed of dog had not been enough to arrest James, so they obtained a search warrant for James' car. Inside, they found two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, they discovered an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious because James had no children and Jessica had had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach. Additionally, the car had brand new tires that had barely been used, which James had claimed to have changed on the day Jessica was murdered. However, his previous tire had not been very old and could have lasted a few more years. Police investigated further and discovered that one of James' old tires had been left behind at an auto service. When they compared the tire tread pattern to prints found near Jessica's body, they did not match. However, it was possible that tire marks on the ground did not belong to the killer's car but to another vehicle. Police also searched James' apartment, where they found a box containing several rolls of trash bags similar in size and color to the one found on Jessica's body. To determine if there was any connection between the bags, detectives needed to find a way to prove that they had come from the same manufacturer. At first, this seemed impossible, as the bags had had no distinctive markings or features and there were hundreds of manufacturers of similar products. The detectives had had an idea to solve this problem. They contacted Roberts, a quality control specialist for the company that had manufactured the bags found in James' apartment. Roberts pinpointed the factory that had produced the bags based on a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. The code indicated that the product had come from a facility in Virginia. Roberts explained that a small amount of iron or titanium was added to the bag's composition, depending on its color. Because the factory produced bags in many different colors, the materials used in production changed constantly, causing the ratio of plastic and iron or titanium to change daily. To take advantage of this information, experts used high-intensity X-rays to measure the presence of iron and titanium in the plastic of handbags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene. This analysis provided exact ratios of elements, which were identical in both bags. This suggested the bags had been made on the same day and possibly from the same batch. However, there was more to the story than that. During the production of garbage bags, microscopic debris accumulated on the machine and imprinted on the plastic sheets as they were rolled out. This created a unique stripe pattern on each bag, visible to the naked eye. Even though the debris on the conveyor belt was constantly changing, creating a new pattern every few hundred feet of fabric, the results were consistent enough to provide another possible lead in the investigation. The similarity of the bags suggested that not only had they been produced in the same batch, but they had also been produced within a short time frame, perhaps just a few hours apart. Comparison of the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene revealed a striking match in the lines and patterns on the bags. On further inspection, experts showed that the bags had been rolled into bundles by machine, which could have created irregularities during the rolling process. Although these irregularities were hardly noticeable, They could be detected by examining the edges of the bag, where the folds formed a unique pattern. Upon re-examining the bags, experts discovered that the pattern on the bags at the suspect's apartment matched the pattern at the crime scene. Further analysis also revealed that fibers found on Jessica's clothing had matched the carpet in James' apartment and the upholstery of his car seat. An audio expert had also analyzed the 911 call recording and compared it to James's voice sample, concluding that the voice in the recording belonged to James. Although the evidence was only circumstantial, detectives still believed in James' involvement in the case and decided to arrest him. James was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Despite James continuing to deny guilt, the case still went to trial. The prosecution presented its theories, highlighting James' frequent outdoor activities with his dog, which had earned him the trust of local children, including Jessica. According to police, James had met Jessica while walking his dog and had struck up a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, and she agreed because she knew him. After the meal, James allegedly invited Jessica to his home. While his wife was away, evidence had shown that Jessica was actually at James's house that day, as fibers from his living room carpet were found on her clothes. The investigation revealed that James might have tried to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Forensic evidence indicated that the killer had strangled Jessica with their bare hands and pressed their palms against her face, possibly to silence her if she tried to scream. Panicked, the killer then placed Jessica's body in a trash bag and transported it to their car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. The killer dumped her body near a water station, called 911 from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's attorneys attempted to defend the evidence, arguing that there was no concrete proof of James' guilt. Although the judge accepted the evidence, the defense pointed out that in murder cases, the standard of proof is higher and more direct. Therefore, the possibility that James could avoid the death penalty was very large. A plea agreement was offered to James based on the circumstances surrounding the case. The deal required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder and accept a sentence of 40 years in prison without parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. 2 years after the murder, in the summer of 1998, James accepted the deal. Although he was not required to provide details about the crime, he said that one of the reasons he accepted the deal was to spare Jessica's family the torment of the trial. The prosecution believed James showed genuine remorse for his actions and used the 911 call as evidence. The purpose of the call was unclear, but it suggested James was trying to alleviate his guilt. However, Jessica's parents were not satisfied with this deal because they had hoped for the death penalty and wanted James to confess to the crime. Despite this, James remained silent about the details of his actions. James did not fully serve his sentence. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49 from health problems, taking with him details of his crimes and motives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Smith was born on May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Kansas. Kelsey was the third of 5 children in a close-knit family. Her parents, Gregory and Missy Smith, raised her alongside her siblings, Steve, Lindsay, Kat, and Zach. Gregory Smith, the family patriarch, was a retired U.S. Navy veteran and had served in the police force for over 20 years. He was enjoying his retirement after a long and dedicated career. Kelsey grew up in a loving family environment, close to all her siblings. Kelsey's mother, Missy Smith, has dedicated her life to health care, working at a local hospital for many years. Despite her busy career, she has managed to balance work and family life well, raising her children and creating a warm family environment. Kelsey has been an active, outgoing, and creative child since she was a child. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments, which she learned in music school. She was also active in school theater and choir performances. Kelsey is also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and soccer. She often attends sporting events with her father and brother, cheering on her local team. With a great sense of humor and many talents, Kelsey has left a deep impression on those around her. Her love for animals, which began in childhood, inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian after college. During her senior year of high school, Kelsey found work at the local symphony orchestra, where she played the clarinet at various city events. Through this job, she set a goal of saving enough money within 6 months to buy her first car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Although her parents were concerned that the car was an older model, they offered to contribute to the cost so that Kelsey could buy a newer car from the family budget. However, Kelsey was determined to buy her first car herself, using only her own savings, so she turned down their offer. The Kelsey family prioritized providing their children with a well-rounded education, focusing on education and personal development. They also instilled in their children a strong sense of discipline. The family had clear rules that everyone followed without exception, including sharing their plans and notifying each other if they would be out late. Kelsey demonstrates her adherence to these rules by being punctual, sharing her whereabouts with her parents, and informing them of her social activities. During her senior year, Kelsey began a romantic relationship with Todd Smith. She describes it as deeply in love and like the relationships depicted in books or movies. They celebrated New Year's 2007 together and have been virtually inseparable ever since. John, who is 1 year older than her, appears to be a responsible and caring partner who treats Kelsey with respect. Both sets of parents approve of their relationship. In May 2007, Kelsey turned 18, graduated from high school, and was accepted into a prestigious university in Kansas to study veterinary medicine. This was one of the happiest times of her life. However, these happy days did not last long. Kelsey attended parties with her classmates to celebrate the end of high school and enjoyed spending time with John. At this point, Kelsey had achieved everything she wanted, got into her dream college, and was in a fulfilling relationship with a wonderful partner who was planning to propose. Her life was bright and happy. However, her disappearance from a shopping mall parking lot on June 2, 2007 changed everything. Kelsey and her boyfriend John were about to celebrate a big milestone, 6 months of dating. To make it special, John planned to propose with a custom-made engagement ring and had booked a romantic dinner for they of them. Unaware of John's plans, Kelsey also wanted to surprise him with a gift. That Saturday, she got ready, drove to a nearby Target Corporation store, and called her mother around 7 p.m. to say she had found the gift but needed a special bag for it. Her mother suggested checking the mall across the street from Target Corporation for a romantic gift bag. Kelsey thanked her mother for the advice and promised to be home soon. John was supposed to pick her up at 8 o'clock. However, after that conversation with her mother never heard from Kelsey again. Kelsey failed to return home. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet of flowers, he was shocked and frightened to discover Kelsey's absence. Her parents were equally terrified, as it was unlike Kelsey to ignore phone calls and texts. She had vanished in a busy area during the daytime, and no one had witnessed her disappearance. Kelsey's father and 2 eldest siblings began searching for her. They found her car parked at the Oak Park Mall, which gave them a glimmer of hope that she might still be inside the mall for some unknown reason. However, after thoroughly searching the mall, inquiring with salespeople and security guards, they concluded that Kelsey was not there. Upon returning to the car, they found it undisturbed with no signs of struggle or violence. Kelsey's father, a former police officer, decided not to touch anything to preserve potential evidence, as the car might be part of a crime scene. Kelsey's parents reported her missing to the police the same day, but the police were initially hesitant to start searching right away. They explained that since Kelsey was 18, she wouldn't be considered missing until 24 hours had passed. However, Kelsey's father, who had connections, insisted on an immediate search. He also asked hospitals in the city if a woman matching Kelsey's description had been admitted. That evening, the police interviewed Kelsey's family and John to confirm their whereabouts and rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure in missing person cases. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the Target store, which showed Kelsey entering the store, browsing, making a purchase, and leaving while talking on the phone to her mother. She was asking her mother about a gift bag and then drove to the Oak Park Mall across the street, as her mother suggested. Kelsey parked her car near the side entrance of the mall, close to the wall. Her car was inspected by experts and appeared to be untouched from the outside. The gift for John was on the passenger seat, and her backpack with personal items, including a tablet and wallet with $300 in cash, was in the back. Since everything was still inside, robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. It appears Kelsey only left with her credit cards and phone, as everything else was still in the car. There were no signs of struggle, blood, or damage, and the only unknown fingerprint was found on the driver's seatbelt, which did not belong to Kelsey, her family, or boyfriend. The investigation tried to track Kelsey's location through her mobile phone signal, but the device was inaccessible, possibly turned off or damaged. Despite this, it was possible to determine the last known location of the phone to narrow the search area. However, Verizon Communications, the wireless carrier, delayed providing the necessary data for several days. Instead of refusing to cooperate, the company kept promising to look into the matter, which effectively slowed down the process. In 2007, telecom companies were permitted to keep subscriber information from law enforcement, including police and FBI, without a court order. They based this on data protection laws. Not even situations where someone's life was in danger were exempt from this rule. A closer look at surveillance footage revealed a disturbing detail: a mysterious stranger was stalking Kelsey. The man initially did not attract attention because he kept a safe distance and did not interact directly with Kelsey. He was a Caucasian man between the ages of 20 and 25 with dark hair, short and a light beard, wearing a plain white t-shirt and black shorts. He followed Kelsey into the Target store about 30 seconds and continued to follow her from a distance as she browsed the various sections. The surveillance cameras captured his movements, and his behavior was later described by the prosecution as similar to a predator stalking its prey. After Kelsey left the store, the man followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in his Chevrolet truck, waiting until she was alone. It's possible that he overheard her conversation with her mother, as he was standing close by while she was on the phone. This may have allowed him to learn about her plans to visit the nearby shopping center. Unfortunately, Kelsey had parked her car in a poorly lit spot, next to a side door and a storage area, which made it difficult for the cameras to capture what happened next. As Kelsey sat in her car, the man parked his truck beside her and got out, wearing the same white t-shirt and black shorts. The stranger came up to her on the driver's side and, likely threatening to harm her, forced her to get behind the wheel of his Chevrolet. The truck then drove away in an unknown direction. Due to Gregory Smith's connections and experience, he believed that the more attention and coverage the case received, the higher the chances of finding their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. As a result, the story was featured in both national and international media, including the popular show, America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage showed the stranger following Kelsey, the clearest images of his face were broadcast on the news, urging viewers to come forward if they recognized him. The police received calls from people claiming to have seen the man in various cities and states, although most of these reports turned out to be incorrect. Each lead was investigated. On June 6th, a woman named Mrs. Miggs called the police, stating that she recognized her neighbor, Edwin Hall, from the footage. Initially, she had hesitated to report it due to doubts, but the information about the truck removed her last doubts, as Edwin owned an old 1970s Chevrolet. On June 6, 2007, two significant events occurred in the investigation. The police received crucial data from Verizon Communications about the last known location of Kelsey's phone signal. This information pinpointed a specific cell tower, allowing the police to establish a 1.1-mile search radius to the north. Within 45 minutes of starting the search, Kelsey's body was found in the brush near Longview Lake, Missouri, about 30 meters from where she was abducted. The medical examiners determined that she had been brutally assaulted and strangled with her own belt. Kelsey's body was discovered without clothing, except for the belt used to strangle her. Her body was carelessly discarded in the bushes, partially covered with dry branches. Over the 4 days it lay exposed to the June sun, her remains were severely disfigured by insects and wildlife, making them almost unrecognizable. Despite the state of her remains, the examination confirmed that the body was indeed Kelsey Smith. The second major event on June 6 was the arrest of the main suspect. When police arrived at his residence, he remained calm and acknowledged that his friends called him Jack. He agreed to provide a statement at the police station. During the interrogation, Edwin Hull claimed he had never seen Kelsey before, even when shown a photograph of her. When presented with surveillance footage from the store that showed him following her, he insisted that he had only visited Target for personal reasons and hadn't noticed her. He suggested that their appearance together in the footage was just a strange coincidence. Despite being shown irrefutable evidence, Edwin seemed confident that he had covered his tracks and couldn't be held accountable. He had thoroughly cleaned his van and had used protection during the assault, leaving no DNA evidence behind. However, Edwin agreed to cooperate with the investigation and provided his DNA sample and fingerprints. A crucial piece of evidence emerged when his fingerprints matched those found on Kelsey's car's seatbelt buckle. A thorough search of his home also revealed a hidden air pistol with Kelsey's DNA on the barrel. Edwin was officially charged with abduction, assault, and murder. A jurisdictional issue arose, as Kelsey was abducted in Kansas but her body was found dead in Missouri. This was important because it affected the potential sentence. In Missouri, Edwin faced the possibility of a capital punishment trial and sentence. Edwin realized the seriousness of his situation and, after consulting his lawyer, decided to confess to the crime and provide details in the hope of a reduced sentence. He described how he had noticed Kelsey entering the store and followed her, getting close enough to overhear her phone conversation about visiting the shopping center across the street. Edwin waited until Kelsey was alone, then followed her to the adjacent parking lot. He was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance. He got out of his vehicle, armed with a pistol, and waited for Kelsey to return to her car. As she was getting into the driver's seat, he prevented her from closing the door. Kelsey had already pulled out the seatbelt, and Edwin allowed her to buckle up, leaving his fingerprint on it. Edwin then put the pistol barrel in Kelsey's mouth, threatening her to move to his vehicle's driver's seat. Kelsey drove Edwin's truck while he aimed the gun at her and gave her directions. When they reached a remote area at the state border, Edwin ordered Kelsey out of the truck and led her into the bushes. There, he assaulted and strangled her with the belt, then covered her body with branches. He thoroughly cleaned his truck to eliminate any evidence of Kelsey's presence, including fingerprints and DNA. He then hid the pistol, which had Kelsey's saliva on it, in his home, believing it would never be discovered. When questioned about his motive, Edwin failed to provide a clear answer, instead making a comment about the victim's physical appearance. During the investigation, several other women and girls came forward, revealing a pattern of abuse and harassment by Edwin. Further investigation uncovered more instances of Edwin's wrongdoing, including coercing a 14-year-old neighbor into intimacy, harassing a waitress, and fleeing a restaurant without paying. These findings led to additional charges, including corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft. Edwin's lawyer attempted to garner sympathy from the court by highlighting his client's troubled childhood, past victimization, and unstable upbringing. Despite these efforts, the defense was unsuccessful. Edwin's lawyer was the only person to speak in his defense and show support. Notably, Edwin's wife attended all court hearings but chose not to defend her husband, instead sitting quietly in the background. On September 16, 2008, a Johnson County judge sentenced Edwin Hall to 27 life sentences without parole. After hearing the verdict, the defendant apologized to the Kelsey family for his actions and broke down in tears. He is now serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paula Reyes. Nancy Paula Reyes Gores was born on April 13, 1991, in the small village of Granados in Guatemala. She grew up in a poor family with 4 siblings. Her parents, Jorge and Pren Gorzi, worked hard to provide for their children's education, hoping they could have a better life. Nancy attended school and later enrolled in the university in Delanua, where she studied business administration and document management. She was an exceptionally diligent student who earned top academic accolades. Despite her academic success, she struggled to find a promising career. During her studies, she worked as a cashier in a supermarket and was later promoted to administrator, but her career advancement stopped there. During her university years, Nancy was in a relationship with a young man and had 2 daughters. However, the relationship didn't work out, and they separated. The father did not financially support his children. Nancy continued to live with her parents, working at a supermarket, but saw no future prospects. With barely enough money for essentials, change was necessary. In 2013, her older sister moved to the United States, found a good job, got married, and settled well. Inspired by her sister's success, Nancy decided to transform her life. She chose to relocate to Europe, specifically Spain. At the time, she couldn't afford a one-way plane ticket or initial expenses. Nancy worked hard for years, saving enough to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, reassuring her parents that she would stay in touch regularly. Upon arrival, she planned to secure housing and a job. She brought a few thousand euros to cover initial expenses, such as renting a room and basic necessities, until she found stable employment. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who remained with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. However, Nancy didn't stay in Madrid for long. She moved to Barcelona and later to Cadril, a city in the Spanish province of the same name. Nancy maintained regular contact with her family, calling home almost daily to check on their well-being and sending money back to support them. Despite not having a stable job, Nancy managed to make a living through various odd jobs, including cleaning for affluent families and caring for the elderly and sick. She never complained about her hardships. Instead, she told her family that Europe offered better opportunities and that she could earn more than she would have in her home country, even if she worked non-stop with no days off. It seemed Nancy was content with her lives. She even mentioned plans to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a spacious home for the whole family. A significant romance developed in Nancy's life. Initially, she didn't reveal much about her personal life, citing a busy work schedule. However, in the spring of 2020, she told her parents that she had met a man named Carlos Andres Bustamante and started a romantic relationship with him. They met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to rent. As they navigated their challenges, they grew closer and eventually moved in together. Carlos, who was a year older than Nancy, didn't have a steady income at the start of their relationship and relied on odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering housing costs, bills, and often providing Carlos with money for his personal expenses. However, she never complained to her family about this, so they believed everything was fine and that she had found a good partner in Carlos, with whom she lived a happy and fulfilling life. Around that time, Nancy's two younger brothers also moved to Spain, and she kept in touch with them. She was especially close to her youngest brother, Dennis, who had met Carlos and thought he was likable. In late June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to relocate to Santander, a coastal city in northern Spain. When Nancy spoke to her family on the phone, she mentioned that the climate was better and there were more job opportunities. However, issues began to arise in her relationship with Carlos, which she tried to keep to herself. Carlos was jealous, hot-headed, and cruel. He was content with being financially supported by Nancy and lacked ambition. What's more, he had a problem with alcohol and occasionally used illicit substances. Although he frequently promised to quit and find a stable job, Nancy started to doubt whether she should continue the relationship. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, Carlos seemed overjoyed and promised a better life. However, his behavior worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or his mother. Carlos also started physically abusing Nancy, who tried to hide this from others. On August 12, while Nancy video chatted with her parents, Carlos yelled at her, demanding that she tell him who she was talking to. Despite her explanation, he snatched the phone, verified the caller, and then threw the phone onto a chair before walking away. The next day, Carlos repeated this behavior, grabbing the phone from Nancy while she spoke to her family. He insulted and threatened her, leaving Nancy frightened. However, she told her relatives that Carlos's behavior was due to jealousy and insisted that everything was fine. Her parents urged her to contact the police, but Nancy believed she could handle the situation herself. On August 17, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were alarming, she didn't explain further and instead asked her sister to care for her children if necessary. This was the last time Nancy's sister heard from her. Nancy, who was pregnant, mysteriously vanished on August 20th. At around 2 p.m., she texted her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. It was unusual for her not to follow through on her promise or respond to her family's calls. When her family tried to contact Carlos, he didn't answer his phone either. The situation was worrying, especially since they had recently moved to Santander and had no friends there. Nancy's brothers lived on the other side of the country, making it difficult for them to check on her immediately. A few days later, a suspicious message was sent from Carlos's phone, stating that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. According to the message, Nancy had packed her belongings and left to find her own apartment, was ignoring Carlos's calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real so they could report Nancy missing to the police together. Carlos agreed but didn't show up or file the report. He also stopped communicating with Nancy's family. Nancy's relatives reported her disappearance to the police themselves. Meanwhile, her brothers found Carlos's mother's, Sandra Bustamante, address through Nancy's friends. When they visited Sandra and explained the situation, she burst into tears. She confessed that she suspected her son was capable of harming Nancy, but didn't provide any details. Sandra didn't know where Carlos and Nancy were. Carlos wouldn't answer her calls, only sending brief messages telling her not to ask questions and to give him time. The next day, Sandra is questioned at the police station about Nancy's disappearance and the whereabouts of her son, Carlos. Sandra shared the same information she had told Nancy's brothers the day before and showed the police a long text message Nancy had sent her before she went missing. In the message, Nancy begged Sandra not to give Carlos any money, no matter what sad stories he might tell her. Nancy said Carlos would spend the money on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. He had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior was becoming increasingly threatening. As a result, Nancy was considering leaving him and thought it would be better to end things before anyone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered a disturbing fact about Carlos. He had been convicted of causing physical harm several times before. One of his first victims was his own mother, whom he severely beat when he was 17 years old. At the time, he was given probation. However, after leaving his family's home, he served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and tried to have relationships with. The investigation was just getting underway, but within the first few days, several intriguing details came to light that suggested the union between Carlos and Nancy was troubled from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, was unemployed, struggled with addiction, had a criminal record, and was prone to uncontrollable rage. Nancy's occupation wasn't as straightforward as she claimed. Her work generated substantial income, more than a housekeeper or caregiver could earn. In reality, Nancy offered escort services to wealthy individuals, including Spanish and other tourists, which is why she moved to Santander. Carlos initially accepted Nancy's occupation as it supported them financially. However, upon learning of her pregnancy, he became consumed by doubts about the child's paternity and grew intensely jealous of her continued work. His behavior became erratic, fluctuating between forbidding her from interacting with men and pressuring her to work for money. The man spent the money he took from his mother solely on himself and his vices. A disturbing discovery was made in a rented apartment, where Nancy and Carlos had been missing for nearly a week. Although Carlos had been in contact, he only sent messages and didn't reveal his location. On August 26th, the police finally obtained a warrant to search their empty rental apartment in Santander, and what they found was shocking, leaving no doubt that Nancy was deceased. Blood was found throughout the apartment, with some attempts to clean it up. However, it was still visible in many areas. Further investigation revealed fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs in the clogged drains of the bathroom and toilet. Forensic analysis confirmed that these remains belonged to the missing woman, Nancy. Although Nancy's body was not found in the apartment, evidence suggested that she had been brutally murdered and dismembered in the bathroom. Her remains were likely disposed of elsewhere. Carlos became the prime suspect in the case, but his whereabouts were unknown. A package for a small hatchet was found in the apartment with Carlos' clear fingerprints on it. Security footage from a local hardware store showed Carlos purchasing the hatchet, rubber gloves, and large trash bags on August 20th. He bought a small cart from an elderly vendor, who instantly recognized him from a photo. This led to his arrest and the start of a search for the body. The next day, Carlos went to a police station in Madrid. Trying to deflect suspicion from himself, he went to report Nancy missing but was immediately arrested as the main suspect in the gruesome crime. Carlos claimed he had no involvement, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th. He said he left the town in an emotional state and was unaware of any events involving Nancy afterward. He suggested that Nancy might have been attacked when she returned to the apartment to gather her belongings. However, his story was unconvincing, especially after police found his fingerprints on the hatchet packaging. In the following days, police thoroughly searched nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of dogs, but found no sign of Nancy. They then tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th using his mobile phone signals. The results showed he spent 3 days traveling along the coast, visiting the cities of Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was evident that Carlos attempted to conceal his actions. The investigation continued in Santander. On August 20th, surveillance footage revealed Carlos walking towards a large natural forest park in the evening. He returned to his apartment late at night and then exited again with a cart containing irregularly shaped bags. Carlos vanished from view upon entering the wooded area due to limited camera coverage. He reappeared later with a much lighter cart. After proceeding towards the railway tracks, he returned significantly lighter, indicating where the body might be. However, one question remained unanswered: where was the child? It wasn't until September 16th that authorities discovered bags containing severely decomposed human remains in dense underbrush on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of the missing Nancy Gores, which had been divided into 20 parts using a hatchet, as revealed by security camera footage. While all items transported in the cart were recovered, something was still missing. Nancy's 4-month-old fetus was not found among the remains. The victim's genitals and lower abdomen showed severe injuries from a knife and hatchet. This suggests that the perpetrator removed the fetus and got rid of it separately from the mother's body. Carlos denied being involved and gave conflicting statements. He tried to blame someone else, but the victim's blood was found on his clothes and shoes, which he had tried to wash off. Even though Carlos wouldn't admit to the crime, investigators figured out what happened. Experts think that on the afternoon of August 20th, the man got into an argument with his pregnant partner. He then brutally beat and strangled her in the kitchen, where blood was found on the floor and walls. Carlos moved Nancy's body to the bathroom. Afterward, he went shopping at a hardware store and the market. Using a hatchet and a large kitchen knife, he divided Nancy's body into 20 parts in the bathroom. He placed the pieces into bags, loaded everything into a cart, and then went to the park to look for secluded places to dispose of the body. Late at night, he followed a pre-planned route deep into the park, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. During his trial, Carlos denied his guilt and claimed he loved Nancy. The whereabouts of the fetus he removed from her body remain unknown. From the time of the crime until his arrest in Madrid, Carlos lived off the money he stole from Nancy. He spent the money daily in bars across various cities. It took law enforcement nearly 2 years to investigate, gather evidence, and find witnesses, and the murder trial is scheduled to start in July 2022. In November of the same year, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence handed down to the murderer to be too lenient. Carlos received a prison sentence of 25 years and 6 months. He was also required to pay 150,000 euros in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times." When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppice at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppice, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Bobek's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18 while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardiel Hill Trail. On August 25, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bobek indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lindsay's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Okahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, He made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in the small town of Milton, Florida. She grew up in a loving family and was very close to her older sister. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, a town about 25 miles away from her hometown. She pursued a career in the medical field. Tanya moved to a new city with her cousin Vanita, and they shared an apartment. After moving in, Tanya met a man named James, and they began dating. They eventually moved in together and had a son, Timothy, in 1983. Although Tanya was happy to be a mother, her relationship with James was troubled. They argued frequently, and about a year after their son was born, they decided to go their separate ways. By the end of 1984, Tanya was temporarily living with Vanita, who was now married with 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place as soon as possible. On New Year's Eve, Tanya, Vanita, and her husband decided to celebrate at a local bar. They left their children at a late-night daycare. Around midnight, Vanita and her husband were getting ready to leave, but Tanya wanted to stay a little longer. Since the daycare closed at 1 a.m., Vanita agreed to pick up Tanya's son, allowing Tanya to stay at the bar. Before leaving, Vanita asked Tanya how she planned to get home, since they had driven there together. Tanya replied that she would get a ride from their acquaintance at the bar. However, When Vanita woke up on January 1st, she found that Tanya had not yet returned home. At first, Vanita thought Tanya might have slept over with a friend, so she was not too worried. Then, Vanita's mother-in-law arrived with heartbreaking news. Tanya had been found dead around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident was on her way to the vet with her daughter. While driving, her daughter pointed out a person on the side of the road. Pensacola thought it might be a mannequin, but when she got out to check, she discovered it was a human body. Pensacola immediately returned home and called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the body of a woman lying in an empty lot beside the road. She had no shoes, her tights were down, and her dress was pulled up. Near the body, a blue towel with what appeared to be bloodstains was found. The police identified the victim as 23-year-old Tanya McKinley. Further investigation led them to discover her shoes and purse nearby, containing identification with her name on it. The body was turned over to medical experts for further examination. Meanwhile, police continued to process the crime scene. They soon discovered that Tanya likely did not die where she was found. There was no significant blood near the body, except for a stain on a towel, and signs on the ground suggested that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the towel and Tanya's body, investigators found several clues, including dog hair and a human hair. They suspected that the hair belonged to the killer, and that the killer may have owned a dog. Medical experts determined that the Tanya had suffered a head injury from a heavy object, but her cause of death was actually strangulation. They also confirmed that the Tanya had been sexually assaulted. A semen sample was collected from her body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science. However, the experts were able to establish that the suspect had type B blood. Police began to develop a list of potential suspects. Police turned their attention to Tanya's ex-husband, James. After talking to Tanya's family and friends, police discovered that James and Tanya had argued frequently before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to end the relationship, James was unhappy and tried to convince her to stay. Police believe that James followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They brought James in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the crime. He also agreed to provide hair samples for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the samples, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that James' hair was significantly different from the hair found on Tanya's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. Police focused on everyone who was at the bar on New Year's Eve. They asked Vanita if she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya, but she said the evening had gone off without incident. Police also discovered that after Tanya split from her ex-husband, she had started dating a man named Kurt, who was a bartender at the bar where she spent New Year's Eve. Kurt was working the night of the murder. When questioned, Kurt denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he had gone to a New Year's party with friends after his shift. The police reviewed all the testimony and concluded that Kurt had enough time to commit the crime. Based on numerous interviews with people at the bar, the police determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one saw her leave. The police also spoke with local residents where the body was discovered. A family reported driving past the scene at around 2 a.m. and were certain that there was no body at that time. This meant that Tanya was killed about 1.5 hours after she was last seen alive. During this time, Kurt was unable to provide an alibi. He volunteered to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, and further investigation revealed that Kurt's blood type did not match the killer's blood type, as determined by a semen sample. As a result, Kurt was cleared of the crime. Unable to analyze DNA from the killer's semen, and with no witnesses or concrete evidence, police could only assume that the perpetrator likely lived in the area where the body was discovered. The case had been closed for years due to lack of concrete evidence. Timothy, who was only 18 months old when his mother died, was raised by his father and Tanya's family. Together, they kept the truth about his mother's death a secret. When Timothy was 14 years old, he was informed that his mother had died in a car accident. As Christmas approached that year, out of curiosity, he searched his father's closet for his present, and Timothy stumbled upon a shocking letter addressed to television host Montel Williams, written by his father himself. In a letter, Timothy's father wrote asking for help in solving the murder of Timothy's mother, Tanya. The letter included a detailed account of the crime, which was the first time Timothy learned of his mother's tragic fate. Years later, in the early 2000s, police reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA technology might help identify the killer. Police sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. Experts discovered that the blood on a blue towel near Tanya's body came from a man, not Tanya. They created a DNA profile of the unidentified man and uploaded it to the FBI database. But there were no matches. The case was put on hold until 2015, when it was reopened, 30 years after the murder. Through investigation, the police discovered from the FBI's archive database that a person had some similarities with the DNA found at Tanya's crime scene. However, the match was not strong. To investigate further, the police learned about the person's family background and even contacted his relatives for assistance. These relatives cooperated and provided DNA samples for comparison. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis showed that his family was not involved in Tanya's death, leaving the police with no new leads. In 2018, a journalist named Tony Adam became interested in Tanya's case. Tony contacted the police offering help, and the police became suspicious of his involvement. Tony joined the investigation despite having no background in criminal investigations. The police, who had made little progress in the case, hoped that Tony's involvement wouldn't hinder the investigation. In 2019, a year after Tony got involved, police decided to identify the killer's relatives. This time, they enlisted the help of Parabon, a genetic genealogy company, and expanded the search to include primarily the DNA of known criminals. Parabon expanded its search to public genetic databases, which were much larger in scope. Unlike DNA evidence collected from a crime scene, these databases contain DNA samples that people have voluntarily uploaded to find relatives. To find the killer, experts used a process of elimination, carefully analyzing the family trees of potential relatives to identify someone who matched their suspect's criteria. They were looking for a man who was at least old enough to have committed the crime in 1985 and had a connection to the area where the crime was committed. In 2020, police identified a suspect in Tanya's murder. Daniel Wells, 57, had been arrested in the late 1980s for assault and indecent exposure. At the time, he was living in Pensacola, working as a carpenter and living with his wife and children. But to confirm whether Daniel was actually the killer, detectives needed to compare his DNA to the profile they collected from the crime scene. To prevent Daniel from fleeing, the police approached cautiously. They kept watch, waiting for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample from him without arousing Daniel's suspicion. Daniel threw a cigarette butt out of the car window near his workplace. The police collected the cigarette butt and immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. Experts extracted DNA from the saliva on the filter and compared it to the DNA of the killer in the Tanya case. The results were a match. The police eventually identified Daniel as the culprit and arrested him the same day. Despite the DNA test results, the police still tried to get Daniel to confess. They arranged for a patrol officer to stop Daniel's car under the pretext of doing a routine ID check. Detectives then approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to accompany them to the station without providing any further explanation. By withholding information, they intentionally kept Daniel in suspense, allowing them to proceed with the investigation cautiously. The police approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to come with them to the police station without further explanation. During the investigation, the detectives slowly steered the conversation toward Tanya's murder, asking Daniel about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. At first, he claimed to have never seen Tanya. However, when the detectives revealed that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his story began to unfold. As the questioning continued, Daniel's denials became increasingly unconvincing, and he grew more and more agitated. Detectives made it clear that the DNA evidence was irrefutable and that he would face consequences for his actions. As the interrogation continued, Daniel denied his guilt and became increasingly agitated. The police said the DNA evidence was incontrovertible and he would face the consequences for his actions. Faced with the evidence, Daniel finally broke down and began to speak. He and Tanya went to his house, where they had sex after drinking. However, an argument broke out, the argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, Daniel panicked and dumped her body in a location where it was later discovered. On his way back, Daniel discarded the Tanya's belongings and returned home. When questioned about the dog hairs found on the Tanya's clothes and towel, he attributed them to his roommate's black Labrador. Contrary to Daniel's claim that Tanya died from a head injury, the medical evidence clearly showed that the cause of death was strangulation. In a possible chain of events, Daniel struck Tanya in the head, but when he realized she was still alive, he resorted to strangling her. The police gathered enough evidence to arrest him for murder. Police then contacted Tanya's family, including her son Timothy, to inform them of the developments in the case. Timothy was deeply moved, thanking the police for finally identifying his mother's killer. 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An investigation confirmed that he had committed suicide. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery, the case of Sarah Foxwell. Sarah Foxwell was born on May 18, 1998, in Salisbury, Maryland, into a large family with 2 sisters and 4 brothers. Her mother had 3 additional children from a previous marriage. After her parents divorced, Sarah's mother struggled to care for her children alone. She worked long hours, so the children often stayed with relatives. As the middle child, Sarah played a peacemaking role, usually managing to bring her siblings together despite their frequent arguments. In December 2009, 11-year-old Sarah temporarily moved in with her aunt and grandparents, who lived in a spacious farmhouse on the outskirts of Salisbury. The kids loved visiting their aunt's home, which offered plenty of room to play. On December 22, 2009, the whole family was filled with joy and excitement, eagerly awaiting the upcoming Christmas day. After a pizza dinner, they began getting ready for bed around 9 p.m. Sarah shared a room with her 6-year-old sister, Emma, at the end of the hallway near the back door. The sisters chatted for a bit before falling asleep. The next morning, Sarah's grandfather went to wake the kids, but only found Emma in the room. He searched the entire house, thinking Sarah might have already gotten up, but couldn't find her anywhere. He informed Sarah's aunt, and together they thoroughly searched every room and corner of the house. When they couldn't find Sarah, her aunt suggested she might have gone outside to play in the snow, but her shoes and jacket were still at home. Then, her aunt noticed that Sarah's toothbrush was missing from the bathroom. After searching the surrounding area and finding no Sarah, her aunt called Sarah's mother, who rushed over. They then contacted the police, who arrived quickly and began searching the house. Sarah's aunt explained that she always checked the doors and windows every night before bed, including the previous evening, and the police couldn't find any signs of Sarah inside or nearby. When they learned about the missing toothbrush, the officers considered the possibility of an abduction, thinking the kidnapper might have taken the toothbrush before leaving with Sarah. They then decided to verify if all the doors and windows were indeed locked as Sarah's aunt had claimed. As investigators approached the back door next to Sarah's room, they found it unlocked, despite her aunt's insistence that it had been locked the night before. This discovery raised suspicions, since the family kept a spare key outside, which was now missing. The fact that the perpetrator knew about the spare key shows that he was very familiar with this family. Furthermore, the family's dog, which normally barked at strangers, had remained silent that night. The police launched a massive search operation, fearing that Sarah might have been kidnapped. News of her disappearance spread quickly, prompting many local residents to contact the police and offer their assistance. The police chief has made a public appeal through the media, asking people to check their cameras for any suspicious activity. Dozens of local police officers joined the search, with assistance from neighboring town police departments and police from other states. The police were hopeful that they would find Sarah alive, as the perpetrator had taken her toothbrush, which could indicate that they intended to keep her alive. With this in mind, the police dedicated all their resources to the search. Outside the house, investigators found their first clue, fresh tire tracks in the snow, suggesting the kidnapper had arrived by car. Since Sarah's warm clothing was still at home, it was unlikely the kidnapper had taken her on foot. Meanwhile, at the police station, Sarah's family was in for a surprise. Her 6-year-old sister, Emma, who shared a room with Sarah, whispered to their grandmother that she had seen the person who took Sarah. Emma claimed she had woken up to a man talking to Sarah, but pretended to be asleep, unsure of what was happening. She then saw the man leave the room with Sarah. What Emma said next sent shockwaves through the family. She knew the man who took Sarah. It was Mr. Thomas, the ex-boyfriend of Sarah's aunt. A man named Thomas had a history of violence against women and girls. Despite his criminal record, he spent a lot of time at Aunt Sarah's house and the children got to know him. The police knew Thomas well because he had many criminal records. Thomas first went to prison at 18 for attacking a 12-year-old girl, but he was released early after just a few months. He was sentenced again for assaulting another minor, but he was released early once more, this time after serving 6 months due to good behavior. Thomas continued to exhibit violent behavior, including another assault for which he received a 6-month sentence. He also tried to assault a girl on the same day his wife returned home from the hospital with their newborn baby. His wife eventually divorced him and obtained a restraining order after he threatened to kill her and their daughter. In another disturbing incident, Thomas targeted 2 young girls sitting on a porch. He approached them, claiming he had been watching one of them play in the yard, and called her a wild girl. He then used a stick to hit her on the buttocks, prompting her to run inside and tell her mother about the attack. She recognized Thomas from the window and recalled seeing his face before she moved into the house. She had previously checked the local sex offender registry and found his photo listed. She immediately reported him to the police, and the case proceeded to court. However, Thomas avoided punishment for his actions. Before the trial, she was threatened not to mention that Thomas was a sex offender and had a previous conviction for sexual assault. A few months prior to Sarah's disappearance, Thomas was arrested again for breaking into a 24-year-old woman's bedroom at night, undressing, and masturbating beside her bed. He was released on bail after his arrest. Initially, Thomas hid his criminal past from Sarah's aunt, but she eventually discovered the truth. Despite this, Thomas managed to persuade her that the accusations against him were false and that he was innocent. Detectives are certain that Thomas was the person who kidnapped Sarah. This suspicion was reinforced by the fact that during his relationship with Sarah's aunt, he had spent an inordinate amount of time with Sarah, more so than with the other children in the household. At the time, this behavior didn't seem unusual, but now that Sarah is missing, it appears highly suspicious. To further investigate, the police visited Thomas's residence, a shed located on his parents' property just a few miles away. They brought him in for questioning and obtained a search warrant for the shed. Upon searching, they found it to be in disarray with poor living conditions, but no evidence linking Thomas to Sarah's disappearance was discovered. However, the police did find a large collection of adult magazines and DVDs, which filled the shed. During the interrogation, Thomas denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. He claimed that he was struggling with his own personal issues, specifically his tendency to commit crimes against underage girls. According to Thomas, he had made a conscious effort to avoid being alone with the children while dating Sarah's aunt, in order to avoid any false accusations. When confronted with Emma's testimony, which placed him at the scene of the abduction, Thomas dismissed her account, stating that she had a history of fabricating stories and that he was not there on the night in question. Detectives were skeptical of Thomas's story. It wasn't just because of his prior convictions. As they questioned him about 11-year-old Sarah's disappearance, Thomas seemed to take pleasure in the situation, smiling and mocking the sheriff. Although it is certain that he planned the crime without any mistakes, the police still work hard to solve the case and find out the truth about what really happened. Thomas claimed to have a solid alibi, stating he was at a bar with a friend until late at night. However, investigators found a discrepancy in his story. Although he was indeed at the bar, he left around 1 a.m. and wasn't seen again until 7 a.m. the next morning. A review of his phone records revealed that he had sent messages to several women, proposing to meet up, but all of them declined. Despite the inconsistencies in Thomas's story, detectives still couldn't gather enough evidence to incriminate him. Their primary concern was finding Sarah, and they poured all their resources into the search. A search of Thomas's pickup truck yielded several crucial clues. Inside, they found Sarah's green toothbrush and a large lollipop, which suggested that Thomas might have used the candy to lure her into his vehicle. Furthermore, the tire tracks on his truck matched the ones found in the snow outside the house on the night of Sarah's disappearance. Thomas had lied about not visiting Aunt Sarah's house for more than a month. This did not deter the police and volunteers from continuing their search for Sarah. They searched extensively, covering many miles around her house, checking abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. K-9 units and helicopters assisted in the search. The community provided immense support to the police efforts, with hundreds signing up to volunteer. The poor weather and upcoming holidays did not dampen the search, but unfortunately, the efforts yielded no results. The search party resumed early the next morning, with their numbers increasing rather than dwindling. Eventually, the number of volunteers swelled to 3,000 people. Due to the sheer volume of volunteers, the coordination center had to be relocated from the police station to a larger venue, the local baseball stadium. Many of the volunteers brought their children to assist, handing out essentials such as water, hot tea, and food. Despite the odds, the search continued with renewed determination to find Sarah alive. While investigators were questioning Thomas, they received another crucial piece of evidence. After he was brought to the station, his clothes were sent to the lab for analysis. Experts discovered foreign DNA on Thomas's underwear, which they compared to a DNA sample from Sarah's belongings. The results showed a complete match, leading detectives to a disturbing conclusion. It appeared that Thomas had sexually assaulted Sarah after abducting her. Despite the lack of progress in the search, thousands of people gathered on Christmas Day, December 25th, to continue looking for Sarah. Meanwhile, investigators obtained GPS data from Thomas's phone, which showed the cell towers his phone had connected to, although the exact locations were not provided. Police discovered that on the night Sarah vanished, her phone had connected to 3 cell towers, allowing them to narrow down the search area to a roughly triangular zone. Investigators focused on this location, located near the state border, about 8 miles from Sarah's aunt's home. The area was densely wooded, but hundreds of people thoroughly searched every inch of the territory, holding out hope for a Christmas miracle that Sarah would be found alive. Sadly, the outcome was far more tragic. Around 4 p.m., police discovered Sarah's body on the ground, near the state border. She was lying on her back with her arms raised upwards, pointing towards the sky. Medical experts performed an autopsy and were shocked by what they discovered. They confirmed that Sarah had been sexually assaulted and showed signs of strangulation. Additionally, experts found dirt in Sarah's lungs, suggesting that the perpetrator had attempted to drown her in a puddle. During this torture, Sarah lost consciousness. The experts also found evidence that Sarah had suffered severe burns. It is believed that the perpetrator may have left her lying in the forest for some time, went to get gasoline, and then returned to set Sarah on fire. Significantly, traces of smoke were found in her lungs, indicating that she was still alive when the fire was set. This also explains why her hands were raised and pointing to the sky. Likely a reflex reaction to the fire. The sheer cruelty of these actions shocked and horrified everyone involved in the case, including the detectives. After reconstructing the case, the investigators' main goal is to ensure that the perpetrator, Thomas, receives the death penalty. Thomas continued to deny any involvement in Sarah's disappearance, but the evidence against him was substantial. After discovering Sarah's body, forensic experts found several strands of hair and pieces of fabric from Sarah's pajamas on the front seat of Thomas's pickup truck, further linking him to her kidnapping. Based on all the evidence, it is very unlikely that Thomas will escape punishment. The trial was delayed for over a year, but it never took place. In early 2011, the prosecution offered Thomas a plea deal. Under the terms of the agreement, Thomas would plead guilty and receive a life sentence, rather than facing the death penalty. While this deal may seem lenient considering Thomas's crimes, there were valid reasons for accepting it. A key consideration was that Sarah's younger sister would have to testify multiple times in court, facing the man who had murdered her sister. Sarah's kidnapping and murder were devastating for her family, and there was a risk that the trial's outcome might not bring them the justice they sought. Due to uncertainty about securing the death penalty, the prosecution presented a plea deal. This deal meant that Thomas would not receive the death penalty, and in return, he would plead guilty to the crime. The terms of the deal also ensured that Thomas would not be eligible for early release from prison. Another issue was that the state governor at the time opposed the death penalty. Ultimately, Thomas agreed to the deal and confessed to the detectives, revealing details they already knew. He admitted to tricking Sarah into leaving her house with him, then taking her away, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. As a result, Thomas received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum security prison. During his initial days in prison, Thomas was assaulted by a fellow inmate with a homemade weapon during lunch, resulting in several severe lacerations. Despite the attack, Thomas survived and was later given increased protection by prison staff. The public was outraged by Sarah's case, which exposed repeated failures in Thomas's custody, allowing him to be released but continue to commit crimes. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case, the case of Doreen Herbert. Doreen Herbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California. She grew up in a very large family of 5 children. Her kindness and desire to help others defined her as a person. After college, she moved to San Francisco, where she worked as a physiotherapist. Doreen also nurtured a dream of creating her own large family. This aspiration became a reality when she met Michael Dennis, who worked near her clinic. They began dating, got married, and in 1976, their son Paul was born. Initially, Michael and Doreen were happy, but the birth of their child marked the beginning of their marital troubles. A year later, they decided to go their separate ways, with their son staying with Doreen and Michael receiving regular visitation rights. Doreen and her family were still able to maintain a fairly stable life despite the many hardships they faced. She met Charles, and they started dating, eventually getting married and settling in a quiet neighborhood in San Jose. They was thrilled when their daughter Diana was born in 1979. Charles was eager to be a father and was delighted to welcome Diana, raising her alongside Doreen's son from a previous relationship. Tragedy struck in February 1980 when disaster befell their young family. 4-year-old Paul slipped through the fence surrounding their backyard pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was at home at the time, discovered what had happened too late. She immediately pulled Paul from the water and called for emergency services. Paul was rushed to the hospital and connected to life support, but after 10 agonizing days, the medical team concluded that he had no chance of recovery. The heartbreaking decision was made to disconnect Paul from life support. Doreen was heartbroken and consumed by guilt, despite the police investigation clearing her of any blame. However, with the help of her young daughter, she slowly began to heal. For years after the traumatic event, the family finally received some good news. After 2 previous miscarriages, Doreen became pregnant again, and this time, everything seemed to be going smoothly. They was expecting a baby boy, due to arrive in early November. Just days before Doreen's scheduled hospital visit, the family decided to participate in Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, the neighborhood was filled with decorated homes, children trick-or-treating, and parents handing out candy. Diana, now 4 years old, was excited to join in and her parents agreed. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she accompanied her daughter on the trick-or-treating adventure, while Charles stayed home to hand out candy to other children. Charles and his wife, Doreen, had returned home from taking their daughter trick-or-treating. Just before 9 p.m., noticing they were running low on candy, Charles decided to make a quick trip to the nearby store to restock. At around 8:50 p.m., he left the house, leaving his wife and daughter behind. 15 minutes later, he returned home to find the front door slightly ajar, which seemed suspicious. As he entered the house, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife, Doreen, lay on the floor in the corridor, surrounded by a large amount of blood and showed no signs of life. Charles immediately called 911. In the living room, he then found the body of their unborn child. Charles was in shock, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. At first, he wondered if Doreen had had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that something much more serious had happened. Next to their unborn child lay Doreen's best severed hand, making it clear to Charles that his family had been attacked. Fearing for his daughter's safety, he frantically searched for her. There was so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Eventually, he found his daughter hiding behind the sofa in the living room. She is still alive and unhurt. When paramedics arrived, they found Doreen's weak pulse and rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, Doreen did not survive and was pronounced dead in the ambulance. Her unborn child also did not survive. The attacker had inflicted severe injuries on the baby after removing it from Doreen's womb. A post-mortem examination revealed that Doreen had been stabbed multiple times with a long, sharp object, possibly a sword or machete. The crime scene was particularly disturbing, with blood covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. Police officers at the scene were deeply affected by what they witnessed. Despite a thorough search of the house, no signs of the perpetrator or any evidence were found. However, investigators did discover bloody footprints leading from the house to the middle of the road, suggesting that the killer may have escaped in a vehicle. Soon, investigators found another crucial piece of evidence on the lawn in front of the house, a wolf mask covered in blood. They believed it might belong to the killer, as Charles reported they didn't own such a mask. The evidence was sent to the laboratory for analysis, and police attempted to question Diana, who was the only witness in this incident. Although shaken and in complete shock, Diana provided valuable details about what happened. She explained that shortly after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. When Doreen answered, she saw a man wearing a wolf mask and holding a long blade. He threatened to kill her, and Doreen immediately screamed at Diana to run out of the house. Diana hid behind the sofa but couldn't recall what happened next until her father found her. Initially, the police found it suspicious that the victim's husband, Charles, had left for the store just minutes before the killer arrived. This coincidence led investigators to consider him as a potential suspect. When Charles returned home, he unknowingly stepped on blood multiple times, even falling and getting covered in it. Despite this, Diana was unable to help identify the attacker due to the wolf mask. Police initially considered the possibility that Charles might have intentionally gotten blood on his clothes to create an alibi. However, detectives quickly discovered several inconsistencies in this theory. Firstly, Charles's shoes did not match the bloody footprints found on the street. Secondly, the killer likely escaped in a car parked in front of the house, but no blood was found in Charles's vehicle, nor was a different pair of shoes discovered. To investigate further, police went to the store that Charles had visited that evening and spoke to the staff there. They confirmed that Charles had indeed purchased candy from him. This established an alibi for Charles, as he didn't have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage from the store supported Charles's account, leading detectives to temporarily rule him out as the prime suspect. They then asked Charles if he knew of anyone who might want to harm his family. Charles immediately pointed out Michael, Doreen's ex-husband. According to Charles, Michael's behavior changed dramatically after the death of their son, who had drowned in the pool. Michael blamed Doreen for the boy's death, believing she had deliberately killed Paul to cut ties with him. Michael filed a lawsuit against his ex-wife Doreen, holding her responsible for the death of Paul, but lost the case. Their marriage had been troubled even before their divorce. After the birth of their son, Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic, often withdrawing into depression and distancing himself from his family. Doreen suspected that Michael's childhood traumas were to blame. As a child, Michael had hearing problems and wore a bulky hearing aid, which earned him constant teasing from his peers. This led to him growing up as an introvert with few friends and a fear of interacting with women. Although his relationship with Doreen seemed to have helped him overcome these issues, they eventually resurfaced and contributed to their decision to divorce. When Doreen married Charles, Michael began to resent her, particularly for the fact that another man was raising his son. These feelings became even worse after Paul's death, made Michael hate his ex-wife even more. Michael has also been unemployed for a long time, which had a significant impact on him. After considering this information, the detectives decided to visit Michael's house to speak with him. Although Charles's statement alone was not enough to make Michael the main suspect, the fact that Michael lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house prompted the detectives to pay him a visit immediately. The officers arrived at Michael's home around midnight and noticed a pickup truck parked near the garage. When police shined their flashlights on Michael's car, they saw blood on the steering wheel and keys. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Lights were still on inside the house and they could hear running water, leading them to suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. They continued knocking until Michael opened the door. Michael remained calm, even after being informed Doreen's murder. Michael answered the officers' questions calmly and allowed them to enter his house without a warrant. He claimed that he had gone to the store earlier that day, returned home, and hadn't left since. He even agreed to sign a form allowing the police to search his home. However, as he reached for the pen to sign, officers noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself while carving a pumpkin for Halloween, but the police were skeptical of his story. The wound was fresh, with blood still seeping out. As officers searched the house, Michael accompanied one of them upstairs to retrieve his ID. However, when Michael reached for the bed headboard, the officer intervened, sensing suspicious behavior. Why would Michael store his documents behind the bed? Curiosity led the police to conduct a deeper investigation. Upon approaching the bed, they spotted a holster attached to the headboard, containing a loaded gun. The officer confiscated the weapon and escorted Michael downstairs to the other officers. Meanwhile, the officers discovered a trail of blood droplets leading from the house to the garage. And they found a washing machine and a pile of clothes with bloodstains. This evidence is enough to arrest Michael. A thorough search of the house by detectives and forensic experts followed, seeking evidence that might link Michael to the murder. Although the blood analysis would take a few days, the police made some disturbing discoveries. They found an empty box for an 18-inch machete. Medical experts confirmed that the wounds from this knife matched the actual wounds found on Doreen's body. During the investigation, police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's house, leading them to believe that he was planning to harm his ex-wife, Doreen, and her husband. The presence of medical body bags at his home was also suspicious. As detectives pieced together the evidence, they went to a judge to request a warrant for Michael's arrest. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence, they were initially only able to hold him for a limited time. When the judge refused to issue an arrest warrant, citing insufficient circumstantial evidence to convict Michael, he was released from prison. But detectives eventually got vital information from the autopsy results. Experts discovered that the crime scene had blood from 2 individuals. One blood type was identified as Doreen's, and the other was Michael's. This evidence suggested that Michael had likely injured himself while attacking Doreen. With this new evidence, the judge quickly issued a warrant for Michael's arrest, charged him with the murder of Doreen and her unborn child. In addition, detectives discovered that Michael owned a wolf mask identical to the one found near Doreen's house the previous Halloween. Further inquiry revealed that Michael had worn the mask to a party, and a photograph of him wearing it was even obtained by police. To validate this, detectives searched Michael's home and found the same clothing he wore in the photo. To search for new clues to the case, the police interviewed Doreen's neighbors about the incidents that happened that night. Several children who were trick-or-treating reported seeing a man wearing a wolf mask standing across from Doreen's house, eyeing it intensely. This sighting occurred around 7 p.m., a full 2 hours before the murder. Michael's trial commenced in July 1988, 4 years after the crime. He initially pleaded guilty but later changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. A psychologist evaluated Michael and diagnosed him with severe mental health issues. Michael claimed that the horror of Halloween was too much to bear, as the sight of children trick-or-treating reminded him of his own loss and triggered a mental breakdown. He alleged that this breakdown led him to visit Doreen's house armed with a machete on the evening of the murder. When Doreen opened the door, Michael revealed his true identity as the man behind the mask and made a shocking statement: she killed their son. Recognizing the man as Michael, Doreen quickly screamed for her daughter to run and Michael immediately attacked her. Michael claimed he was unaware that Doreen was pregnant at the time of the attack, but this assertion was met with skepticism. Doreen was visibly pregnant, standing at 4 feet 1 inches tall, and her friends found it hard to believe that Michael wouldn't have noticed, especially given her prominent belly. In fact, her friends joked that her pregnancy had made her almost as wide as she was tall. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned the crime in advance, a claim supported by evidence from the investigation. Detectives discovered that Michael had previously shared his desire to kill his ex-wife and her husband with friends, and had even discussed disposing of their bodies in the bay. The presence of 2 coffins and body bags in his home suggested that he was serious about carrying out this plan, and the prosecution argued that he had adjusted his intentions for some reason to target Doreen instead. Michael may have panicked or feared being caught, prompting him to leave the house quickly. During the trial, Doreen's 9-year-old daughter, Diana, testified about what she witnessed. Charles had wanted to spare his daughter the traumatic experience, but she was the only witness to the crime. The trial lasted a year, ultimately resulting in Michael's conviction for the murders of Doreen and her unborn child. Michael was sentenced to death, but a moratorium on the death penalty in California delayed his execution. As a result, Michael remains in prison, and his sentence will be carried out. Years later, Diana revealed that the murder had such a profound effect on her, and she could never forget the horror she witnessed. Ultimately, Diana decides to forgive Michael and try to move past the past to focus on the future. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson was born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. She majored in political science at the University of South Carolina. She plans to attend Drexel University School of Law with the goal of specializing in international law. Samantha received a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University, and hopes to pursue a career in international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona. While in South Carolina, she also visited Madrid and Paris. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg. Samantha and Greg communicated regularly through text messages and phone calls every day whenever possible. Even though Samantha was about to enter law school, they still planned to build a future together. Greg planned to move in with her and support her. However, everything changed on Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha did not return to her apartment. On March 28, 2019, Samantha decided to hang out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend, Greg, was unable to come along, the group visited several bars before ending up at the Bird Dog Bar in 5 Points, a popular place for students to socialize. Samantha was hanging out with friends, but she kept texting her boyfriend, Greg. She wanted him to drive to Columbia to be with her. However, they had plans to meet up the following weekend, so Greg decided not to go to Columbia with her. He kept in regular contact with Samantha. Around 2 a.m., Samantha left and returned to her apartment alone. She called an Uber to get home. Samantha was waiting for an Uber. While waiting, she talked to Greg on the phone at around 2:04 a.m. and told him she was on her way home. She had used Uber many times before to get to and from bars. Shortly after requesting a ride, a car pulled up at the curb where Samantha walked up to the car, realized it wasn't hers, and then turned around to return to her spot on the sidewalk. She was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in front of Samantha. She said goodbye to Greg, assuming the Impala was her ride. She opened the door, exchanged a quick word with the driver, and got into the back seat. The car sped off immediately. Meanwhile, the actual Uber she had ordered arrived at the pickup location, but the driver couldn't find Samantha and eventually canceled the request and left. The black Chevrolet Impala circled the area several times before targeting Samantha. This behavior suggests that the driver was aware of the college students who congregated on 5 Point streets after the bars closed, waiting for the car to leave. Meanwhile, Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, had been tracking her movements using the Find My Friends app to make sure she got home safely. He noticed that she was moving in the opposite direction of her apartment, which initially did not raise any concerns because he thought she might be visiting a friend. However, when he texted her to check in, he received no response. Greg tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer. He sent her multiple texts, but they showed up as delivered, not read. This meant Samantha wasn't reading his messages. Her phone's location stopped sharing, which surprised Greg because it had never happened before. He thought maybe she had left her phone in the Uber. Concerned, Greg contacted her friends and roommate to see if they had heard from her or if she had made it home safely. However, no one had any news about her whereabouts. Greg decided to rest, hoping Samantha would show up tomorrow morning. The next morning, Samantha was missing. Her roommates filed a missing person report. Her boyfriend, Greg, drove 2 hours to Colombia to help search for her. Shortly after the report was filed, a group of turkey hunters found the body of a young woman in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles from 5 Points. The hunters immediately called 911 after the discovery, and the local sheriff's office quickly dispatched deputies to the scene. The body was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. An autopsy revealed that Samantha's body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, affecting multiple areas, including her face, head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet. In an attempt to defend herself, her fingernails were severely damaged as she tried to evade a sharp object. Evidence suggested a double-edged knife had been used, and she had then been dragged into the woods. An autopsy revealed that her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Samantha had suffered severe blood loss. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage from the bar the night of the incident, which showed Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala. The footage showed the car circling the block several times. Police discovered that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha had called arrived a short time later. However, when the driver realized that Samantha was not there, he canceled the ride and left. Police believe that the suspect may have used a childproof lock to lock her inside, as when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of the car, so Samantha would not have been able to get out at that point. A description of the vehicle was released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator, and shortly after, police spotted a black Chevrolet Impala during a 3 a.m. patrol on March 30th, while patrolling the area where Samantha was abducted. When the police stopped the car, the driver immediately jumped out and started running. After a short chase, he was arrested. When police checked his ID, they discovered that the man arrested was Nathaniel Rowland, 24, of New Zion. During a search of the vehicle, patrol officers discovered a child car seat in the back, surrounded by blood stains. This discovery prompted them to call for backup. As police suspected it was a crime scene, homicide detectives were called to investigate and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. They discovered multiple blood stains on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was found on the floor of the car. Police later discovered that Nathaniel had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he had refused their offer of $125 and left the phone in the car. Police also found that the child locks were activated, which Nathaniel had used to lock Samantha inside. Several cleaning products, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes, were found in the car. Nathaniel had cleaned his car, but there was still a trace of blood in the car. During questioning, Nathaniel repeatedly denied any involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. He maintained his innocence. Police searching Nathaniel's body discovered traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. However, no DNA from Nathaniel was found on Samantha's body. Police pieced together the evidence and speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still active at the time of Nathaniel's arrest led them to conclude that he must have activated the feature as soon as Samantha got into the car. Nathaniel suddenly stabbed her multiple times with a double-edged knife. Taken by surprise by the brutality of the attack, she struggled to fend off the blows, which explains the multiple stab wounds to her hands and the severe damage to her fingernails. Samantha was attacked by Nathaniel, who scratched Nathaniel's hand, leaving skin cells under her fingernails as evidence. After the attack, Nathaniel drove to a remote road in New Zion and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Nathaniel posted on social media, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathaniel's neighborhood is minutes away from where Samantha's body was found. A background check on Nathaniel showed that he attended South Carolina State University in 2017. However, there is no record of him graduating, and it is unclear what job he was doing at the time of the incident. Nathaniel was previously arrested for assaulting and robbing a woman in October 2018. Police searched Nathaniel's girlfriend, Maria Howard's apartment in New Zion, where he was living. They found evidence in a trash can behind the apartment, including a sock and towel with blood stains on it, which belonged to Nathaniel. The blood was later determined to be Samantha's. Police also discovered a blood-stained white cloth, duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a double-edged knife with obvious blood stains. Tests later confirmed that blood found on the double-edged knife, bed sheets, car, and bleach wipes matched Samantha Josephson. Nathaniel was charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial took place. Nathaniel maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. In the summer of 2021, Nathaniel's defense team argued that he was innocent, as there was no DNA of his on Samantha. Prosecutors countered Nathaniel's claim of innocence with a large amount of evidence gathered in the case. Key evidence included CCTV footage showing Nathaniel's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, as well as several incriminating physical pieces of evidence found in his car. Additionally, cell phone tracking showed that Nathaniel and Samantha's phones were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Nathaniel lived near where Samantha's body was discovered. The prosecution presented 31 witnesses, including a person who saw Nathaniel cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoes after being in Nathaniel's car. After the murder, Nathaniel did not contact any witnesses to testify in his favor, and no members of Nathaniel's family came forward to defend him. Despite this, Nathaniel maintained his innocence and appealed to the judge. The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of the Harvey family. Brian Taba Harvey, 49, was a local icon who rose to fame in the 1980s as the lead singer and songwriter of the indie band House of Freaks. Although he and his musical partner Johnny Hott went their separate ways professionally in the 1990s, they remained close friends. A dedicated musician, Brian performed on stage for the final time on New Year's Eve, unaware that it would be the last night of his life. On the other hand, Catherine Gravinsky, 39, found success as co-owner of World of Mirth, a popular toy store in Richmond's Carytown district. She was an artist who pursued various endeavors, including painting sets for community theater, working as a pastry chef, and waitressing. Catherine had an older sister, Shelley Gravinsky, and was also the half-sister of actor Stephen Culp, known for his roles in TV shows such as The West Wing and Desperate Housewives, as well as various films. Brian and Catherine's paths crossed at the Border Cafe on Main Street, where Catherine worked and Brian frequently visited with Johnny. In 1990, Brian and Catherine got married. The House of Freaks then released an album featuring a song called I Got Happy, which was dedicated to Catherine. The couple had 2 daughters. Their first daughter, Stella, was born in 1996. After becoming a father, Brian realized that having children helped him find meaning in life and the importance of keeping hope for his children's future. Their second daughter, Ruby, was born in 2001. While working in the computer department of the Henrico County school system, Brian continued to pursue his passion for music. Meanwhile, Catherine started her own business, opening a unique toy and gift store called World of Mirth in the Carytown neighborhood. The store was designed to be a welcoming space for parents and children to spend time together, and children are free to play with the available toys. Brian Harvey's family lives in a quiet, quaint neighborhood south of Richmond. Their two-story red brick house was surrounded by large trees, porch swings, and ivy-covered gardens. They had a cozy family room in the basement. The family was well respected and loved in the community, and it seemed no one had any ill will towards them. On New Year's Day, 2006, Brian, his wife Catherine, and their two daughters, Stella and Ruby, were preparing for a busy day. They were hosting a barbecue lunch for friends and family, a tradition they enjoyed every year on this day. They woke up early to get everything ready. That Sunday morning, Brian went outside to collect the newspaper, absorbed in the front page news. He didn't lock the door when he came back in, which wasn't unusual for them, especially on party days when friends would be arriving. The neighborhood was considered safe, so they didn't think much of it. However, on that day, Brian was unaware that some criminals were secretly lurking nearby. Catherine was busy in the kitchen, preparing cookies for the guests who were expected to arrive soon. Suddenly, she heard voices coming from the living room and thought that some guests had arrived early. But when she went to check, she was shocked to see two strangers instead of familiar faces. Later, Brian, Catherine, and their young daughter Ruby were ordered to go downstairs to the basement playroom. Stella, who had spent the night at a friend's house, had not yet arrived home. Once the family was in the small room, the intruders used electrical cords and packing tape to tie them up. The intruders told them that as long as they cooperated, no one would get hurt while they searched the house. Just as the intruders were starting to ransack the house, someone knocked on the front door at around 10 a.m. The leader of the intruders untied Catherine and told her to answer the door. However, he warned her that if she tried to escape or ask for help, her daughter and husband would be killed. Catherine was in a difficult situation. Stella was about to arrive, and if she answered the door, she would put her daughter in danger. On the other hand, if she didn't answer the door, the intruder might get angry and hurt her family. In the end, Catherine decided that it was best to cooperate, so she opened the door. Stella suddenly ran past Catherine and into the playroom, where the family usually spent a lot of time together. Catherine quickly intervened, stopping Stella's friend from following her. Kyron Perkinson, the friend's mother, later expressed her surprise at Catherine's unusual behavior. When Perkinson asked Catherine how she was feeling, Catherine said she was not well. Then, she made a circular motion with her hand, mimicking a gun and pointing it at her head. This abruptly ended the conversation, and Catherine shut the door. This strange gesture would later trouble Perkinson, wondered if Catherine was trying to convey something. She wondered if Catherine being monitored by the intruders. Perkinson left, intending to return later for a party. All four members of the Harvey family were now inside the house. Catherine went back to the basement and found Stella had been securely tied up alongside the rest of the family. Everyone was caught helpless and defenseless. Chaos broke out unexpectedly and without any prior indication. The assailant revealed a knife taken from the Harvey's kitchen and began slashing the family members' throats. Angry that he had to wait so long for them to die, he ordered his accomplices to hit them hard on the head. However, the accomplice refused. The assailant then grabbed a claw hammer and ruthlessly struck the family members repeatedly until they stopped moving. After removing Catherine Harvey's wedding ring, the assailants set the room on fire using wine as an accelerant to conceal evidence of their crimes. As they escaped from the scene, they ate a plate of freshly baked cookies from the kitchen counter and stole a laptop, DVD player, and other items. They rushed out and entered the getaway vehicle parked outside, where a woman was waiting. She was related to one of the robbers and had been on lookout duty during the incident. They quickly departed, leaving the scene as quietly as they had arrived. Later that day, around 1:30 p.m., Johnny arrived at the celebratory gathering. Upon opening the front door, he was met with a thick cloud of smoke and a strong burning smell. Alarmed, he alerted the neighbors. They quickly called 911. Firefighters arrived at the scene and put out the fire. However, they soon discovered 4 bodies in the smoldering basement. Despite initial appearances, investigators determined that the fire did not cause the deaths. Instead, they found evidence of a more sinister cause. The investigation was now treating the incident as a murder case. The scene was so heartbreaking that it left even the police and medical staff, who were accustomed to dealing with traumatic situations, utterly stunned and shocked. Some were even seen crying openly. The discovery that parents were made to watch their children being brutally killed, and that children were also forced to witness the brutal deaths of their parents, was especially devastating. Autopsies revealed that Brian and Catherine died from blunt force trauma to the head. Stella's death was caused by a combination of blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation, suggesting she was still alive when the fire started. Ruby's cause of death was stab wounds to the neck and back, resulting in her death. The authorities immediately launched an investigation into the murders, but they had little evidence to work with. To gather more information, they appealed to the public for assistance. This approach proved successful when, on January 6, a woman named Latoya P.Y. contacted the police, requesting a welfare check on her friend, 21-year-old Ashley Basil Tucker. Latoya expressed concerns that Ashley's boyfriend, 29-year-old Ree Joseph Dandridge, and his uncle, 29-year-old Ricky Javon Gray, were involved in the Harvey family's murder. Gray, who was slightly younger than his nephew by a few months, was reportedly the one in charge. The investigation took a significant turn when Latoya revealed that the 2 men had hidden evidence of their crimes at her residence. She disclosed that Gray and Dandridge had recently visited her home with a laptop that had an image of the Harvey family as its wallpaper. Given the extensive news coverage of the Harvey case, it was clear that the laptop belonged to the family. Latoya revealed information about the plan that Ashley, Gray and Dandridge had devised to rob Ashley's parents. According to the plan, Ashley would pretend to be a hostage, allowing Dandridge and Gray to extort money from the Purcell Tucker, Ashley's stepfather. This would make Ashley appear innocent, even though Latoya knew about the plan and was offered a role in it. However, Latoya became suspicious of the group and declined to participate. Later, when Latoya asked Gray and Dandridge about Ashley's whereabouts, they gave a cryptic response, saying, "Ashley has gone bye-bye." This increased Latoya's concerns, and she contacted the police. The information she provided was crucial in helping investigators connect the dots. When investigators arrived at the residence where Ashley lived with her mother, Mary Baskerville Tucker, and stepfather, Purcell Tucker, they found a gruesome scene. Inside the home, they discovered the lifeless bodies of all 3 victims, who had been subjected to a brutal and violent death, similar to the Harvey family. The victims were bound, gagged, and had their throats slit. Duct tape was wrapped tightly around their heads, causing additional suffering. Mary and Purcell had deep neck lacerations, and Purcell had a sock inserted into his throat. Ashley was found to have been suffocated with a plastic bag. The cause of death for all 3 victims was determined to be suffocation and torture. The police believed that the killer's primary motivation was a thrill-seeking desire, rather than any obvious personal benefit, so they worked together to catch them before they could hurt anyone else. Similar to the Harveys, Percyle and Mary live a quiet life with no known enemies. Percy works as a forklift driver, while Mary works for a cleaning service company. Their peaceful life was shattered by their daughter's betrayal, leading to the tragic death of a couple enjoying their golden years. Investigators quickly discovered a crucial connection between the Harvey family's case and the Tucker family's case. Ashley was found wearing Catherine's wedding band, which had been missing and taken from Catherine. With this revelation, urgent action was necessary to apprehend Gray and Dandridge before they could inflict further harm. Authorities tracked Gray and Dandridge back to their home state of Pennsylvania and apprehended them in Philadelphia on January 7. Dandridge claimed that Gray planned the murders and he just followed orders. When faced with these accusations, Gray provided explicit and disturbing details of the two family massacres, explaining that financial gain was the primary motivation behind their actions. Notably, during the Harvey family murders, he was under the influence of an illicit substance called PCP, also known as phencyclidine or angel dust. This potent drug is known to cause auditory and visual hallucinations and often leads to aggressive behavior. During his confession, Gray showed no emotion, maintaining a chilling stare. His indifference to the lives he took led investigators to view him as a ruthless and heartless individual. Additionally, it was discovered that Gray was responsible for the murder of his wife, Trevor Terrell Gray, whose body was found in a shallow grave in Washington, Pennsylvania. The couple, married for 6 months, lived together in a house owned by Trevor's family. They shared the home with Gray's nephew, Dandridge. Trevor's parents reported that the couple frequently had intense arguments. On the day Trevor's body was discovered, Gray had claw marks on his forearm. Initially, neither Gray nor Dandridge were considered suspects by the Washington police. Trevor's mother, Manna Squires, claimed that the police thought Trevor's death was due to a drug overdose, which led to a slow investigation. Trevor's death initially raised suspicions, but a thorough investigation did not occur until Gray confessed to the crime in 2006. On December 31, 2005, a violent assault occurred outside a home in Arlington. Two men, later identified as Gray and Dandridge, attacked 26-year-old Ryan Key in front of his parents' house. The assault left Ryan with severe injuries, including stab wounds to the chest, neck, and arms. He spent 2 weeks in a coma due to the near-fatal attack. Additionally, he permanently lost the use of his right arm. Gray and Dandridge faced multiple charges related of the Tucker's family killings. Gray was charged with 5 counts of capital murder, while Dandridge faced 3 counts of murder. Despite initially admitting to their involvement, both men pleaded not guilty. Gray's 6-month trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all counts. He received a life sentence for the murders of Brian and Catherine Harvey. The court also sentenced him to death for the brutal murders of Stella and Ruby. Following Gray's conviction in September 2006, Dandridge chose to accept a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2006. Gray also faced charges in Culpeper County for the murder of Cheryl Warner, a 37-year-old mother of 3 who was found shot and hanged in her burning home. Gray pleaded not guilty, but the charge was later suspended due to conflicting evidence on June 4, 2008. Over the next 9 years, Gray's lawyers filed multiple appeals. They argued that Gray's traumatic childhood had affected his mental capacity. However, the Supreme Court rejected his case in 2016. As a result, Gray was scheduled to be executed on January 18, 2017. On the scheduled date, with all appeals exhausted, Gray was put to death by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center. Meanwhile, Dandridge remains in prison at Sussex 2 State Prison. The Harvey family's brutal murders sent shockwaves of horror and grief through the community. Over 1,400 people attended their memorial service, expressing condolences and sorrow outside Catherine's store. Flowers, dolls, and candles formed a poignant tribute along the curb outside the red brick house. The candles, lit by children, remained glowing for weeks. Catherine's brother Culp described the murders as a devastating blow that felt endless. He spoke about the pain of thinking about the family's final hours, saying that everyone was trying to move forward. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Alexandria Kostyl. Alexandria Kostyl. Born on September 11, 1997 in St. Louis, Missouri, Alexandria, commonly known as Ally, is the adorable daughter of Cindy and Keith and has an older brother named Andrew. Alexandria has a friendly and approachable personality. From a young age, Alexandria's bright smile and warm personality attracted people. As she grew up, Alexandria's positive energy spread a positive life to those around her. She spends time with her friends, classmates, and family members. Alexandria's ability to connect with people from all walks of life is truly remarkable. Alexandria is a charming and compassionate person who always helps those in need. She attended Lindbergh High School, where she developed her passion for athletics. During high school, Alexandria met her best friend, Maddie Norris, and they formed a close bond and friendship that grew into a deep and trusting sisterly bond. Alexandria and Maddie shared a passion for exploring life and trying new experiences. Together, they faced challenges, laughed, and made lasting memories. During their time together, they enjoyed afternoons spent watching movies. One of their favorite movies was Legally Blonde. Once Alexandria got her driver's license, she and Maddie often drove around town in Alexandria's convertible. As their senior year approached, Alexandria still had no date for the upcoming prom. Although a few guys had asked her out, she had never had a serious relationship or boyfriend. Feeling frustrated, she considered skipping the event. However, Maddie asked to be Alexandria's dance partner at the prom. Alexandria was deeply moved, and so Alexandria wore a beautiful red dress to the prom. After graduating from high school, Alexandria made her dream of attending the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi come true. She was drawn to the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss, because of its large student body. An avid sports fan, she was especially impressed by the school's renowned football program. In 2006, Alexandria began her freshman year at Ole Miss, where she majored in marketing and business. While at Ole Miss, Alexandria joined a sorority and became one of its founding members. She is also president of the Ole Miss Golf Club. Alexandria, with a strong passion for sunsets, she took to taking pictures to capture their beauty, with the aim of sharing this beauty with the world. Alexandria created an Instagram account to showcase her beautiful sunset photos. One night, while at a bar in downtown Oxford, Alexandria met Brandon Theld, a charming young man from Fort Worth, Texas. She was immediately attracted to him and invited him to several sorority dances. Over time, Alexandria's feelings for Brandon grew. Born into a loving Christian family, Brandon had a fulfilling childhood, with his father being a prominent doctor in Fort Worth. Growing up, Brandon had a classic Texas childhood filled with activities like hunting, fishing, and soccer. Alexandria's love of the outdoors made him eager to participate in a variety of outdoor activities. During school breaks, Alexandria's best friend Maddie from St. Louis visited Alexandria in Oxford, Mississippi. According to Alexandria, Maddie was excited to see Brandon. However, during Maddie's time there, Brandon did not come to visit and see Alexandria's deceased best friend. This left her heartbroken. Maddie witnessed Alexandria's sadness and felt sorry for her friend. Despite her trauma, Alexandria remained strong and focused on her studies at Ole Mississippi. Alexandria had a great first year, with high grades, new friends, and a strong sense of humor. The summer of 2019, right before Alexandria's senior year, was a time of great anticipation for Alexandria and her parents, Cindy and Keith. They were all looking forward to her senior year at Ole Mississippi. Alexandria's parents decided to visit her at Oxford University for a few days. They were happy to see how quickly their daughter adjusted to her new surroundings. At the time, Alexandria was busy teaching a gym class and attending summer school. When her parents arrived, Alexandria gave them a tour of the campus, showing them her favorite spots in town. The visit gave her parents, Cindy and Keith, the opportunity to see firsthand how their daughter has grown and be proud of all she has accomplished. Cindy, her mother, cooks Alexandria's favorite dinner. During the meal, they shared fond memories. Alexandria's parents had originally planned to return home to St. Louis, but she asked them to stay an extra day so they could experience more of what Oxford had to offer. Cindy and Keith agreed to extend their stay. On July 19th, after returning home, her parents called Alexandria around 7 p.m. She answered the phone, still sleepy from her nap, and explained to her mother that she planned to go out with friends that evening. Cindy told her daughter that she loved Alexandria and hung up. Little did she know that would be the last time she would speak to her daughter. Sardis Lake is a large recreational area 30 minutes from Oxford that has many hunting camps. The area is large and is patrolled by the local police department for safety. On June 20, 2019, a police officer began patrolling Sardis Lake early in the morning. As the officer drove around the lake, he noticed near a picnic table the body of a young woman lying on the ground. The officer was shocked by the discovery and immediately called for help. Other officers and paramedics arrived on the scene a few minutes later. Upon arrival, the officer found a wallet in a nearby ditch. When the wallet was opened, it contained an Old Miss school ID and a driver's license identifying the owner as Alexandria Kostchel. Later, after the discovery of Alexandria's body at Sardis Lake, the police had to notify her parents, Cindy and Keith. However, they were away from home in St. Louis at the time. Her mother was devastated when she heard the news about her daughter. The news of Alexandria's death shocked her friends as well as her parents. Alexandria's friends turned to social media, using the hashtag #JusticeForAllie, to express their grief and demand justice for her. They share fond memories of Alexandria in social media posts, talking about the positive impact she had on their lives. And her friends sent their condolences to her family. Following the tragic death of Alexandria, we express our deepest condolences to the Alexandria family during this extremely difficult time. At the crime scene near Sardis Lake, police found White Claw water bottles and .40 caliber shell casings on the ground. A ballistics expert was called in to analyze the scene and piece together the events surrounding Alexandria's murder. The expert determined that the killer was initially sitting across from Alexandria on a picnic bench when they fired the first shots. However, after the first shot, the killer stood up and began walking around the table toward Alexandria, firing multiple shots as they approached. One bullet missed Alexandria and struck the wooden picnic table. While searching for evidence, police searched Alexandria's apartment but did not find her phone. However, they discovered that Alexandria's Apple Watch had some unexpected syncs with her text messages the night before she was killed. When they examined the messages, they discovered that Alexandria had been having lengthy conversations with Brandon Thade. The messages revealed that Alexandria and Brandon had planned to meet before she was killed. Police investigating Alexandria's murder contacted Brandon on Sunday morning to ask to meet at the police station. However, Brandon declined the invitation that day but agreed to meet the next day at 8:30 a.m. Monday. On Monday, Brandon failed to show up at the police station as scheduled, prompting police to trace his cell phone. Cell phone data showed that Brandon was traveling south on Interstate 55 toward Memphis, leading police to suspect that he was trying to flee. As a result, they issued an arrest warrant and alert for his vehicle, which was easily identifiable due to its unique license plate. 2 hours after the warrant was issued for Brandon, the Memphis Fugitive Task Force located his vehicle at a gas station. Brandon was found sitting in his vehicle at a gas pump, where task force agents arrested him and notified Mississippi police. When police searched Brandon's vehicle, they discovered a .40 caliber handgun. Brandon's clothing was also found to be covered in blood after he exited the vehicle. After his arrest and return to Mississippi, police began tracking Brandon in the days leading up to the Alexandria murders. On Saturday, July 20th, Brandon visited friends and went bowling. The next day, Brandon visited another friend, bringing a 6-pack of beer and the same .40 caliber handgun found in his vehicle. The friend reported that they talked for a while, but when the friend woke up on Monday, Brandon was no longer there. Brandon's background check did not reveal any history of violence or altercations. Interviews with friends and family members of both Brandon and Alexandria provided detailed information about the couple's history. They met at a local bar in Oxford during their freshman year and initially began dating. However, their relationship declined during their sophomore year. Notably, Alexandria's loved ones noticed a change in her demeanor, as she seemed to be more invested in the relationship than Brandon. This imbalance led to tension between the two. Brandon eventually blocked Alexandria from contacting him because she frequently went out at night, drank, and then called him. A year after their breakup, Brandon and Alexandria got back together the summer before Alexandria's senior year. They decided to rekindle their relationship. However, the reunion did not last long. Brandon was eventually charged with Alexandria's murder, specifically premeditated murder, which carries the death penalty. When news of Brandon's arrest spread, it caused widespread shock and attracted intense media attention in Oxford. The community was caught up in speculation and rumors as people shared their theories about the case. Reporters descended on the town, seeking interviews with people close to Alexandria and Brandon. In September 2019, Brandon pleaded not guilty to murder. As police continued to gather evidence, they reviewed text messages exchanged between Brandon and Alexandria before her murder. The messages revealed that Alexandria was concerned that she might be pregnant in April 2019, 3 months before her death. On April 14th, Alexandria sent Brandon a photo of a home pregnancy test result. He made it clear that they would not keep the baby and suggested that they could buy abortion pills. Alexandria, however, did not want an abortion, and she thought that she would meet someone who would love her and her child. Despite this, Brandon was adamantly against having a child, telling Alexandria that it would ruin his life. Police also discovered surveillance footage that showed Alexandria leaving a bar in Oxford Square at around 11:45 p.m. on July 18th. About an hour later, at 1:30 a.m., Alexandria met Brandon and he drove them to Sardis Lake. Brandon's defense attorney claimed that he and Alexandria had been drinking throughout the day. At Sardis Lake, they sat at a picnic table and listened to music. Brandon then got up and walked to his truck, where he used drugs. He walked back to Alexandria, returned to his truck, and retrieved a .40 caliber gun. By the time Brandon retrieved his gun, there had been a shooting on the other side of the lake. After the incident, Brandon and Alexandria continued to talk, but the situation became heated, and Brandon shot her. According to the defense, Brandon's actions were influenced by the combined effects of drugs and alcohol. The police and Alexandria's family saw the incident from a different perspective. They believed that Brandon killed Alexandria because he suspected she was pregnant, which he believed would ruin his life. To them, the murder appeared premeditated. Brandon agreed to a plea deal with state police on August 27, 2021, avoiding the death penalty. Under the deal, Brandon admitted to first-degree murder and received a life sentence without parole. Alexandria's loved ones attended the hearing. Brandon addressed Alexandria's family after the sentencing, expressing remorse for his actions and asking for their forgiveness. He acknowledged the great pain he had caused and hoped they could find forgiveness in their hearts. Although Alexandria's autopsy report showed that she was not pregnant at the time of her death, her mother, Cindy, believes that Alexandria was pregnant and lost the baby.